Hi, my name is Michelle Winthrop. I'm the Irish ambassador to the Republic of Korea, and I have been here for 1 year now, just over a year.
아일랜드가 OECD의 대표적인 양성평등 국가로 도약하게 된 특별한 계기나 사회, 문화적 시스템의 변화가 있다면 무엇일까요?
Probably the first half of that 100 years, Ireland was a very conservative Catholic country. But I would say that the turning point was the popular election of our first female president of Ireland. I think many people, especially in Korea, know who she is. That's Mary Robinson. And I think every Irish woman remembers where they were on the day she made that speech. It was a really special time. Her presidency, I think, gave Irish women their voice, and it really started to turn the tide on women's rights.
양성평등 실현을 위해 아일랜드 정부는 어떤 노력을 해왔나요?
This is a very live debate in Ireland at the moment. In 2020, we established what we call a Citizens' Assembly on gender equality. And the Assembly came up with, I think, 46 recommendations for the government to consider. Gender equality, the provision of services, women in public life, the gender pay gap, education, healthcare, and so on. I think the most important product of the Citizens' Assembly was a recommendation for the government to have a referendum on changing the language in our constitution. What is clear is that the new language needs to not make a distinction between men and women. So that referendum will happen towards the end of the year, and it's quite an exciting opportunity for another debate about the role of women in Irish life.
양성평등 실현을 위한 아일랜드 정부의 노력을 국민이 체감할 수 있는 분야는 무엇인가요?
We actually have quite a high fertility rate. 1.78 live births per woman, and that's one of the highest in Europe. We do have other challenges such as the gender pay gap and ensuring that working mothers can progress their careers just as much as their male counterparts. So parental leave is a really, really important tool that we use in Ireland to help support gender equality in the workplace. It's really important to say that parental leave applies to both fathers and mothers, and that's an important principle because it means that it's a recognition that men and women share the burden of childcare equally. In Ireland, for children under the age of 2, you are entitled to, I think it's up to 6 weeks, 7 weeks, paid leave. And then for children under the age of 12, it's up to 26 weeks unpaid leave. It is worth mentioning that COVID-19 had a bit of a mixed impact on women's place in their careers. For some women, the burden of lockdowns and doing homeschooling meant that it held them back in their careers, and that was a real challenge. But for others, they really benefited from the flexibility that being able to work from home gave them, and it really helped some women blossom, in fact. So I think the key thing when it comes to supporting working mums is flexibility and enabling them to structure their day and structure their week in such a way that supports them doing their job, but also the home responsibilities.
그럼에도 불구하고 아직까지 해결해야 할 과제는 무엇이 있을까요?
Sure, we haven't fixed everything. A particularly difficult one is women's representation in public life. In 2016, we introduced legislation which made political party funding dependent on women being selected up to a minimum of 30% of candidates. And that has had some impact. It means that the number of women members of parliament, or TDs as we call them, has gone from 15% to little over 22%. It's still not very good, it's still pretty poor. We know that we have some broader challenges to address. The fact that being a public representative is not very family friendly is a problem. There's an access to childcare situation. We know that there's a lot of pressure on women in public life. The other issue that we have not yet really successfully tackled is gender-based violence.
아일랜드는 양성평등 정책을 뒷받침하기 위한 입법 활동이 강력한 것으로 알고 있습니다. 구체적인 예시와 집행 과정에서의 반응은 어땠나요?
Legislative change we made actually 50 years ago now, which was to lift a ban that there was on women working in the public sector once they had married. And importantly, it made it acceptable for married women and for mothers to be career women and to work. And that sort of started to shift our attitudes in society. So in Ireland, we haven't seen that much of a difference between the public sector and the private sector implementation of legislation. I mean, for sure, the public sector leads the way in some important areas. So, for example, the government in Ireland is rolling out, department by department, a menopause policy, so a workplace policy that supports women who are going through the menopause. And that's fantastic. But you know, companies, the private sector, are making progress in implementing legislation. Perhaps one area where it is proving challenging is with small and medium companies. You know, many of them don't have the resources, they don't have the money, but they also don't have the manpower to be able to implement those kinds of policies. For example, paid parental leave and so on. And the government is very conscious of that. Enterprise Ireland has, which is the main body in the government that supports companies, recently launched their gender equality plan, and that is really tailored at those small and medium enterprises and providing the necessary supports and sometimes money to help them to get the workplace family friendly and to support equal rights for men and women.
유럽위원회에서 주관하는 2022년 성평등 우수기관 어워드 세계 부문에서 아일랜드 대학이 수상한 바 있습니다. 아일랜드의 양성평등 관련 교육과정이나 체계는 어떠한가요?
So we're obviously very proud that Irish universities have done well in these awards. I think it's really great. There's one of those awards that I would like to highlight. So I think it's Southeast Technical University in Ireland won a particular award for gender equality champions, and I think that one is important because it highlights the intersection between gender equality and other forms of discrimination. That's a really important principle. So discrimination on the grounds of race, on the grounds of age, gender identity, LGBT, for example, and ethnicity. I think they are, if we look at how those areas of discrimination overlap with gender discrimination, it's a very illuminating way to look at gender equality. I think it represents how we approach gender awareness and gender education in schools as well. It's probably a reflection up through the system. In elementary school in Ireland, children undertake a course called SPHE, Social Personal Health Education. When kids move on to middle school, SPHE continues as a topic for them to study.
주한 아일랜드 대사관에서 특별히 시행되고 있는 양성평등 프로그램이 있나요?
The first thing I would say is that the way we operate here in the embassy in Seoul is completely dictated by our headquarters, the Department of Foreign Affairs in Dublin. And we have really, really strong norms and guidelines and rules around gender equality, diversity and inclusion. So we have a zero tolerance approach to any form of workplace harassment or bullying. So that is almost a given. In terms of other programs or other initiatives, so in February 2023, for the first time, the embassy here celebrated St. Bridget's Day. Many people in Ireland know St. Patrick, but St. Bridget's Day is our other patron saint. She was a very powerful woman and her story is a very inspirational one of women's empowerment. To celebrate, we had a reception with a great group of Korean and Irish women. women in business, women in diplomacy, women in science and the arts, charitable work and so on. And it was really a really special evening. We also had a Women in Business networking event to celebrate St. Bridget's Day, because she was also a businesswoman. And they were mostly Korean women, actually, came together to share their stories and experiences. Also a wonderful, wonderful affair.
양성평등에 대한 아일랜드의 미래 비전이 궁금합니다.
That's a very hard question for me to answer. But you know, I came across a quote. If you're going to permit me to read this, I came across a quote in the final report of that Citizens' Assembly that I mentioned from 2020. Gender equality is a matter of human rights, justice and fairness. It must underpin all our interactions as a society. The state has a special responsibility to treat all of its citizens equally, regardless of their gender identity, in compliance with our Constitution. While there are still many inequalities in women's lives that need to be eliminated, we also recognise that gender inequalities are intensified by discrimination on other grounds. Importantly, enhancing gender equality can benefit the whole of Irish society, regardless of gender identity. We are recommending behavioural change so that all citizens are respected and valued. And I think that, I couldn't have described it better myself. I think that basically sends a message that says eliminating discrimination and respecting equality for everyone is an integral part of gender equality. They're not somehow separate.
마지막으로 양성평등 실현을 위한 개인의 노력 방안을 제안한다면 어떤 것들이 있을까요?
There are lots of things individuals can do. You know, modelling good behaviour, modelling tolerance, using inclusive language, particularly also just being open-minded matters a lot. But I think the single biggest thing you can do is to pass those values on to the next generation. I'm very conscious that misogyny in particular is very much learned behaviour. You know, little boys who grow up with fathers and uncles and big brothers who themselves are open-minded and support women's empowerment usually turn out to be good guys and usually turn out to be open-minded themselves. And so the more you can embed those behaviours and that way of thinking, those values in young boys, the better. And also I'm very conscious as the mother of one boy and one girl, in fact, that if you have to send signals to both boys and girls. You have to make girls understand that they can do anything and that they should have zero tolerance for misogyny and fight where the system needs to be fought. So really I hope that my daughter in particular will grow up as an adult in a world where she doesn't have to fight for her rights and she doesn't have to call out bad behaviour, because that would be success as far as I'm concerned.